What is self regulation? It's that ability to monitor how you're doing and manage whatever it is you're feeling, thinking, and doing. So, your emotions, cognition, and behavior. It takes a while to develop, as you see in your teenagers. Dr. Dan Siegel says, in my office, I describe self regulation as the amount of stress I can take without freaking out at someone. To me, that's a pretty good definition. I'd love for us to think about the three components. There's cognitive self regulation that includes focused attention, goal setting, problem solving, perspective taking, decision making, effortful control, which is basically remembering rules and consequences when a person's upset and still being able to make a good decision. Emotional self regulation includes actively managing strong or unpleasant feelings, being able to intentionally relax or calm down, identify a person's feelings, have empathy for others, and be able to soothe oneself. And to be able to do that, we have to be aware of and understand feelings, use self calming strategies, and tolerate or manage internal distress. Kids need to regulate or to integrate their cognitive and emotional regulation to have more effective behavioral regulation. And while cognitive regulation seems to have a stronger influence than emotional regulation before adolescence, during those teen years, emotion regulation has a stronger influence. And it's something that's much harder for teenagers to do. So we need to support our teens when possible. Behavioral regulation includes following rules, delaying gratification, controlling our impulses, persisting when things are hard, and resolving conflicts. So let's think here for just a second about how self regulation proceeds. When babies are born, their parents take on most of the responsibility for the baby's regulation through holding them, calming them when they're upset. Babies' calm down systems in the brain don't come online until after babies are 1 year old. So they depend on their parents a lot. And over time, toddlers begin to take on more responsibility for self regulation, even though they use their caregivers for a lot of support. And they need them when they get upset to be able to help them calm down. We see a period of big growth and self regulation skills beginning sometime between the ages of 3 and 5 and continuing through age 7 or so. That corresponds to myelination in the brain. And that myelination is creating a fatty sheet that helps the messages from one part of the brain get to another part of the brain faster. And this happens especially when kids have parents and other supportive adults who support kids' positive self regulation. But if a kid falls apart at these early ages, they aren't likely to be able to pull it together on their own. They need their parents to support them by calmly helping them to calm down, maybe by naming their feelings, using few words, breathing calmly, connecting with them, being there to help the kids calm down. And it's really great when parents help practice building kids' calm down strategies when things are going well, so that kids are more likely to be able to do it when they fall apart. By the time kids are 8 years old, they've developed many of their self regulation skills, and they'll continue to refine those over time. These school age years can be a time of relative calm, actually, after these structures have been developed. And then comes the time of adolescence. Essentially, what happens during the adolescent period is that kids' brains decide that they're ready to be remodeled. Just like when we update our houses and we make the flow of the house better and we really customize it to what we want and need, that's exactly what's happening in a teen's brain. Their brains will be revamped based on their previous experiences, which of course determined how their brains developed up to then, and then their current needs based on the types of experiences that they're currently having. And just like when there's remodeling happening at a house, things can get a little crazy in a teen's brain until the dust settles again. Sometimes we as parents get frustrated with what's happening with our teens, and sometimes teens think that there's something wrong with themselves. The reality is that it's normal. And the more we can work with what's happening, the better off your teen is going to be able to be. In early adolescence, what's happening is that the prefrontal cortex area of the brain, which is right above our eyes, it adds to itself while also taking away pieces that weren't very efficient. So new circuits that inhibit behavior continue to be formed, which is going to help teens have better self-regulation down the road. The reality, the issue is that the circuits aren't very effective when they're first being built because they're not well connected to other regions of the brain yet. The wiring hasn't been laid down. So there are more neurons and more connections are being built between neurons. And at the same time, the brain is getting rid of connections that weren't being used. That's a lot of remodeling. Adding on, connecting the old with the new, and tearing down old pieces that aren't useful. No wonder teens have moments that just don't seem to make sense to us as adults. Like most remodeling jobs that I've been a part of, things don't happen in an orderly progression. Sometimes there's a flurry of activity, and at other times it just seems so slow. The brain is kind of like that too. Even when it seems like our kids are not getting anywhere fast, there's a lot happening at the brain level that's going to support their success down the road. If you're like me, you've probably had moments where you thought, what on earth was my teen thinking? We talked a little bit about the dopamine reward centers and the striatum and the basal ganglia, which is part of our emotional center, the limbic system. Part of the remodeling process for teens includes creating new dopamine pathways through the striatum and the basal ganglia to the prefrontal cortex. So in the middle of the brain, out to the front of our brains. So what happens with this is that our teens begin to crave and seek cool sensations or experiences, to have stronger emotions. And a big reward for many teens is to get to do cool things with and in front of their peers. And what seems to take charge here are the dopamine pathways and the striatum, which might find risky rewards as very attractive. So those risky, high adrenaline situations could be really attractive to a teenager. And then new experiences can also be exciting for a teen because of what's happening in the brain. And whenever peers are around to potentially reward them for their behavior, this part of the brain might actually go on overdrive and become really motivated to do things that the teen might not do otherwise. And on top of that, while the prefrontal cortex connections, which help us with making good decisions, planning, resisting our impulses, and remembering advice from our parents, for example. So while those connections are developing and reforming, or, kind of remodeling the connections that were there before, while that's happening, the amygdala, which is part of our limbic or emotional system, takes over, and teens very often live in that emotional brain rather than their logical brain. Anybody who has lived with an emotional teenager can probably empathize with that. But, thankfully, that's typically during the heat of the remodeling, and typically as the finishing touches are put on, then the prefrontal cortex takes center stage from the amygdala, and everything else complements the prefrontal cortex. Lots of times this might happen at around age 16 or so. And of course, all this is influenced by genetics and the experiences a teen has. When there's a supportive adult to talk through problems together, to anticipate potential issues or temptations, and to support the teen's developing capacities, this process usually goes smoother. And as our teens continue to grow and develop, our relationships can also develop and deepen, even though they're changing. And parents often become more like a trusted resource for teens to bounce ideas off, to discuss their challenges and brainstorm potential solutions, and to continue to build teens' confidence and their decision-making ability, as they're soon going to be making their decisions without their parents. And even though teens seem like they don't want their parents around sometimes, the truth is that they need us more than ever to help support them as they get ready to launch. And they actually appreciate our guidance when we support them in a way that is respectful of teens' realities and their abilities. It might be that having frank conversations about what's happening in the teen brain, which is great stuff, of course, it can help teens realize that you're just trying to support the good stuff and reduce the risky part, which might get them in trouble and lead to great pain and potentially worse. So, how does trauma impact self-regulation? Trauma during adolescence can disrupt some of the remodeling that's supposed to happen. And depending on when it happens, it can result in a teen who stays emotionally reactive, who has little awareness of danger or ability to resist their impulses to go toward danger. You might have a teen who ends up seeing the world as a more dangerous place and people as more dangerous, and who doesn't seem to have strong connections to their prefrontal cortex. So we see that with little planning and decision-making abilities and impulse control. In order to increase positive outcomes, teens need to have safe, stable, and nurturing adults who can support their recovery from trauma. You really can heal your child's brain through how you interact with them, and you're critical in this process.